Welcome to Blamestorming. Blamestorming. In a post-truth world, there's plenty of blame to go around. Plenty of blame to go around. Plenty of blame to go around. Join Dave Sirus and Maryssa Smith as they blamestorm about today's hot topics.
Hey guys, welcome to Blamestorming. I'm Maryssa Smith. I've got Dave Sirus with me.
Hello.
And we have Joey Gay with us.
His real name, which Maryssa had to have me tell her a few times when we were putting your name in downstairs. She's like, well, I need the name that's on his license, Dave.
And a most gracious welcome completed. Hi.
Joey Gay, one of the hottest young comics in the scene. Joey is a very... No. We last week we had David Feldman. We've had a lot of.
Are you now telling me that I'm relatively young and hot?
I mean,
this date is going terrible
compared to David Feldman. I mean, you're Jennifer fucking Lawrence.
Wow. All right, boy, that made the price of
J-Lo
admission.
2.0.
Our buddy Rob Ryan's going to stop by.
Oh, how exciting!
Very funny guy.
Yes. Will we have a minute and a half of awkward discussion about Rob's name when he arrives?
Probably.
Well, I mean,
fair
no
enough.
one
He's got
believes
two
that's
first names.
Yeah. He sounds just
Let's
as ridiculous.
not get it out of the way now. I'm sure he'll want to weigh in on this.
Yeah, we'll have to like revamp it when he gets in just to make sure.
You guys will have all kinds of fun talking about how you have crazy 7-letter names.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Joey Gay and Rob Ryan.
I'm glad I got off drugs. This is worth it.
This is where the math comes in.
So yeah, we're
Hooray.
Let's Blamestorm.
Okay.
We're gonna blame Storm right now.
Are we going to address how we came into this building?
Okay.
As a group?
Yeah.
I think if we're going to blame Storm, that's good. That's a good place to begin.
Yeah. So the show's at 7.
Allow me to set the stage, if you don't mind. May I?
Oh, please.
I'll set the table. I'm coming into a building where there is a great deal of security and no need for it. As I pointed out to the young lady who was working behind the desk, back in the day, people just walked into a building, did their business, and left. And now there's some sort of futuristic Buck Rogers turnstile that doesn't work well with human movement. And 1 out of 4 people are getting stopped, and this lady has to reboot the computer. And she's putting in my information, and I am being what I like to call a penis. I am being a penis to her. And the two of us are having a good time laughing. And then Maryssa comes in and introduces herself, and we have a small chat. And then Dave, you came in and you were flustered? Flustered? Is that a fair word?
Is fair.
Okay.
I mean, I was screaming and cursing a little, but it was appropriate because I parked and I found a meter. I got here early to find a meter because I have to be here 10 minutes before all the parking is free. So I finally found a meter, and I had to pay for the last 10 minutes of it, but there was no meter to pay. Like, there's no Muni meter, like those blue boxes that you put your credit card in to get a ticket. Mm-hmm. So I went. Usually when that happens, they're like, well, you have to go to the next block. But on the next block, there were none either. So I went to the other block. There was also none. And then I finally found one, but it was for a different set of times, so it was turned off. And I found a traffic cop. I said, oh, what should I do? There's around the block right there. It says I have to pay for parking or I'm going to get a ticket. And there is no place to pay for parking. And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, I mean, he goes, well, was there any meters on the next block? I was like, no. I ran around like a 3-block radius, and there were literally no open meters within several blocks of it. And he said, oh, I guess you should stay by your car. I was like, this is your job. You're the guy who's going to decide to ticket these people. Uh-huh. And I'm showing you there's no way anyone else could either. This is how the French Revolution started. This is how people start breaking down doors and eating the rich.
Right.
Not metaphorically. Eating their fucking bodies.
Oh, my goodness.
No, that's
okay. Let it out.
This is how you end up with revolution. This is what tyranny is. Mm. It's telling people you have to do something and then not giving them the ability to do it as a trap.
It's an unreasonable set of circumstances in which a man cannot live in peace.
With his car.
Yes. Anyone's car. No one who wants to park on that street is given a fair shake by society.
I agree. Yeah, that's
Ironically,
the game is rigged.
Yes,
as
yes.
our president might say.
Yes.
But you suggest beheadings as a reaction
No.
to a
he
rigged party
actually
game.
suggested
French Revolution.
cannibalism. He
Oh.
suggested cannibalism.
You're right. I'm out of line. I apologize.
I was
Let me get you back on board right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
He definitely suggested that people are going to begin eating people.
Eating the rich. That is
Yes,
right.
eating the rich.
Not
'Cause
metaphorically.
poor
as
people
well.
taste horrible,
Which
I think is what he's getting at.
I'm sure they do. Like, you know how they
They
fatten up
taste
animals?
like foie
they'll
gras.
give geese garlic and such.
Yeah.
I was not
The
suggesting
poor are
anything.
just going to taste like really bad fast food. Whereas, you if you are going to eat people, you want those whole food people. Those people
Exactly.
who've been
Those-
going
those
to Whole
organic
Food for years.
people.
Correct.
Because soon the poor are going to start tasting like box government food. Once they start, they're trying to change the way the SNAP system works so that people can go to the grocery store and pick their own food, and they want to actually start shipping food to people that are government sanctioned, which is probably going to be expired by the time they get there. Because
Well, no, it's food that can't expire.
it's so we're just talking Spam and Velveeta,
Which is frightening.
No, they said there will be no meat. So
not even
thought,
Spam.
I thought
Right.
I did read something about that program where they would be sending canned meats, but that is something that I believe that it's going to be very much like MREs, meals ready
Yeah.
to eat, which are for the military.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is just another giant rope-a-dope
Rations.
hand job where one rich guy has figured out how to get products from another rich guy, and both of them kick back a ton of money their grandchildren can't spend.
Right. Number
Right.
one, the box of food means that you're going to take away business from the local businesses that these people were actually using their food stamps for. So there's no longer going to be all the commerce that comes in the private sector. We're now anti-privatizing. We're taking that out of the local businesses. We're also saying that people aren't going to have a choice of what they eat, which is essentially a punishment. It's saying we don't want to let people enjoy their free food. If you're going to eat free food, you better hate it.
There is a real. I think you're.
That's exactly what it is. It's
I
because
agree with
everything
you.
Trump does is for the purpose of trying to please the people who originally voted for him.
Who are the first 8 rows of wrestling?
Yes.
The first
Right.
8 rows of professional wrestling.
No, you're absolutely wrong. They're the
They're
back.
the last.
They're the back.
They're the
I see.
last
Okay,
8
correct
rows.
me.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
definitely.
Dave. I'm
The front
interested
row,
to hear your
because
opinion
I've been on the
this.
front row of wrestling.
Okay.
The front row are the
Do
people
tell.
who have connections.
I see. I know somebody, and he's an idiot.
I was in yes. I was in
Sorry, go ahead.
yes, and I think Trump's fan base is a little bit more WCW than WWF in
Right.
the old terms, because the WCW audience, they actually thought it was real.
Right.
The WWF audience were mostly like children and the parents who knew they were watching a show. WCW were like actual people who kind of thought they might be watching a real fight. And that's what Trump's audience is. People who think wrestling is real.
Right, these WCW people, they're the people who break fluorescent lights over their head and destroy folding tables
You're thinking
in backyards.
that's ECW.
I see. Okay.
WCW was the Ric Flair side of things. They were the grimier, like how when Hulk Hogan was for kids, WCW was all like it was more about like regular Joes beating the shit out of each other. And then later, after WCW
How sad is this?
Yeah. After WCW stopped existing, ECW sort of filled in that space, and they became like the mainstream version of backyard wrestling.
All right, well-
because WCW,
I was just going to make the point that I think there's a correlation between the lack of empathy for people who seek out stuff like that, where a human being is more than likely really suffering in a pretend conflict and not letting poor people enjoy their food. It's the same lack of empathy. It's the same sad space within a person's mind or soul that, makes us all slow down at car crashes. And it seems to me that his base are people who lack basic empathy. I think
they just lack basic common sense because, his whole campaign was supposed to be about, the forgotten man, the forgotten woman, the opioid crisis.
Correct.
Well, who's more forgotten than the people that are on SNAP and they just voted for a guy that's going to give them food that never expires?
agree.
well, don't forget a lot of the people who support Trump, particularly the ones in lower income, they are under the impression, I've seen many, many interviews, they truly believe that there are two different sets of government assistance for whites and non-whites. They actually believe that non-white people and illegal immigrants are entitled to a completely different set of entitlements than they are. And it's a very bizarre argument. I've seen multiple different people say that. And I don't know where they got that from, but it's clearly something that people have been pushing to them. Because I've heard that too many times for it to just be something that some guy just was wrong about. I don't know where they're getting that.
Well, I think that that's also part of what's gone on here, which is this is all just one giant shell game of confusion in which there is no actual shell. Everybody looks at a different cup that's empty, and then when the game's over, he goes, all right, we're going to do it again. Everybody's like, what happened? It's as though the entire country is a teenager with a head wound. Nobody can remember more than a half hour behind them. And we seem to be repeating the same nonsensical news cycle over and over in the same type of obfuscation.
Yeah. Well,
sorry, my head will not allow SAT words.
Well, and
obfuscation. I'm fighting my own head on that one. Sorry.
No, I think you're right. What we're seeing is the world becomes more complicated every day because things just get more complex, but people are not getting smarter. So as we get further along, it becomes more and more attractive because what Trump is basically saying to all his people, to everyone, is the world is a scary, complicated place. And I can turn the world into a simple, easy to understand, safe place where I protect you. And all you have to do is believe me when you know I'm not telling the truth.
And you could do your taxes on a postcard.
Well, yeah, I mean this is Trump's entire philosophy is about selling simplicity to people and make it so attractive that they'll give up their actual objectivity just to believe him. And that's really scary because it's like, the last American Horror Story season was about Trump. And there was one line about it, and the whole thing was just a metaphor for Trump in terms of being a masculinity cult, which is what he is. It's all about taking your hands off the wheel. And Trump lets you take your hand off the wheel. And a lot of people are really scared. A lot of people are terrified. That's what the NRA uses. They use terror. They convince people that there are just hordes of poor people waiting to knock down your door and eat you. I don't know where they get this idea.
Well, you've been yelling it at the beginning of this show. You were mentioning how this parking problem would lead you to cannibalize people in a better in a better financial position.
I was making a warning. Not an endorsement.
Okay.
If I tell you,
I see. Now that's clear, you could go back to you're right. I'm an idiot.
If I tell you it's going to rain, put on a raincoat. I'm not saying I hope you get wet. I'm saying,
wow, that is the type of logic that's usually reserved for 70-year-old drunks who won't say I love you.
Nice.
You're out of your mind.
So now, how much of this do you think is Trump being a good salesman versus how much do you think it is that a population has been completely, really just been pounded by like Russian bots and just Russian media that's been kind of telling them that he's telling the truth. The liberals are lying. The liberals are crazy. The liberals are trying to take away their rights. Because to be honest with you, I don't find Trump to be a convincing salesperson. But I would have never thought Trump was a convincing salesperson.
No.
But there are millions upon millions of people in this country that are believing him. And I don't know, are they so dumb that they're just buying all of his snake oil, or have they literally just been hypnotized by Putin?
Well, what Putin did was scare people more and create chaos, and that's the same thing Trump does, because that's how you get people to think less. The more scared people are, the more chaotic, the more distracted they are, the less they think through. I mean, that's why people with substance abuse problems or mental illness are so often Trump fans, because they're barely white-knuckling their everyday lives. They don't have the wherewithal to think heavily about anything. They're barely there, and that's his bread and butter.
Or the opposite, which is they are feeling every moment and extrapolating every type of bad scenario from every piece of news they get. They're thinking obsessively. That can also be the weight of mental illness, in which case it would have the same effect. It would be great to have a man who came in and made everything simple and made you feel safe. That's, of course.
Yeah, and there's also the element of Trump's blatant insecurity. He seems like an extremely insecure person, and I think a big part of what people like about him is they see themselves in him, and they see this insecure person just lying and getting away with it, and they think, oh, this is going to protect me when I do this. I can, because I'm a bullshitter.
Well, sorry.
No, go on.
I believe that they think that they've been bullshitted for so long by the government that it's their turn to bullshit them back. And they think this guy is bullshitting on their behalf, like, hey, we're getting over on the government now. But what they're not bright enough to see or willing to give up in order to get this feeling is that they're robbing the henhouse, that this is just another way for the Trump brand, the Trump family, to make more money.
Right.
I don't think, if you have a gut check, if you ask yourself, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, what type of political views you have, gut check, you trust the Trump family to love America more than themselves or their brand or business?
No.
And I believe that the average American, even the person who voted for them, knows. They may not say no, but they know.
And that's what's truly scary about this is I think you're right. A lot of these people know exactly what he's doing and know how bad he is at this, but they still want him in power just because they hate us.
Correct.
They want to punish us, and they want to say, these are people who are basically saying, I want Trump to destroy this whole fucking country because that's how much I hate you people. Because at the end of the day, this is about us liberals pissing on what they consider values. And if you boil it down, it's about, I don't care if he lies. I don't care if he destroys the economy. I don't care if he gets us in war. We are fighting for the right for our children to grow up and have same race, opposite sex marriages. That's what this is really about. This is about not raising a gay or trans child who will have an interracial marriage. At the end of the day, as much as they will,
how exhausting.
as much as they think we're calling them bigots, that's what they mean when they say values.
We could fix
what other values are we arguing about?
Oh my goodness, it's suddenly the parking all over again. We could fix this whole country with 2 chemists and a giant vat of MDMA. I think we all just need to spend a weekend listening to fucking music and rolling.
Well,
Hello?
What's funny is that actually,
I'm sorry. I need to take a moment to describe the horror in the eyes of everybody in the studio after I said that. I think the listener needs to know
not a bad idea.
Lost everybody in this room.
You know what, though? What you just said is actually not a new idea.
No, I know that.
Yeah.
It's actually MDMA was made as a marital for an aid for marital counseling.
Yeah, and acid, LSD was one. There was once a plan to give all the world leaders acid to make them love each other. Which, of course, if you've done acid, you're out of your goddamn mind if you think that people just turn into good people. I've seen what happens when assholes do acid. It doesn't help anything. So, but that was a plan. They wanted to
way more entertaining.
They tried to dose Nixon.
Oh my goodness,
they did.
Well, there's some
They tried
regions...
to dose Nixon.
Yeah.
Why are we not writing that screenplay?
That's a good idea. Well, can I tell a really quick story that
no, we're going to stop you. Of course,
having to do with dosing. There's a really funny story that Hunter Thompson told once, and you never know which things Hunter Thompson is telling the truth about. But he wrote this when he was editor-in-chief of Rolling Stone. He was interviewing Bill Clinton before the election when he was running for president, and Bill had just played the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show with Fleetwood Mac. So some famous musician that Hunter was friends with said, well, he sounded really flat. He had a bad reed. And he gave Hunter a reed to give to Bill Clinton. And he gave him this gift. And he said, here, this is from, I forgot the name, but a very famous musician. He was like, oh, my God, thank you so much. And Bill smiled, looked at it, put it in his mouth and blew through it, then took it out of his mouth, looked angry and slammed it on the table and never touched it again. And that's the story. And that's the whole story. And Hunter just says, I have no idea what that was about, why he did that. And then, of course, reading it, you're like, oh, you're Bill Clinton. You're about to be president. Hunter S. Thompson, the most famous acid user in the world, just handed you something meant to be put in your mouth, and you immediately put it in your mouth without washing it. He thought he was getting dosed.
Yeah. Well, like talking about dosing, there are some regions in Japan that are going to start putting lithium in their water supply of their populations.
What?
Yeah, because they did a study and they of different regions of Japan, and they found that the communities that had high lithium levels in their water had less rates of suicide than
Really?
Yeah.
So they already had naturally high lithium
Yeah,
rates in the water?
exactly.
From what?
I maybe their wells. Like I'm not exactly sure why they had a naturally high level of lithium, but then what they decided was that since they had lower like suicide rates in those towns, that they were going to start actually putting like artificial lithium in other towns' water, right? So that they could like lower their rate of suicide in Japan.
Well, that is an amazingly good idea. I'm sure there's nothing can go wrong with forcibly drugging entire swaths of the population. You know,
we have low amounts of like antidepressant drugs in our water now, but it's
I think it might be driving everyone crazy. Yeah.
They say all the water in England has cocaine in it. That there's so much cocaine being done in England that it's gone through people's bodies into everybody's.
I mean, I heard about it being on the dollar, like an all money,
Yes, that's
but like I've
correct as
never
well.
really heard about it like being in like water. Like
Yes,
just, like,
I want to
Coke had
Google
water.
it because I know I just made a moronically broad statement.
No, I mean,
and I would
No,
like,
it's
but
like it's crazy though.
it is.
a lot of things don't get filtered out in water. So like
Yeah.
our water is just loaded with just remnants of drugs that could, look, I know people have never been that sane, but don't they feel a little bit crazier now than literally
You are
ever?
suggesting eating the rich over parking infractions.
I am warning. I am warning
Physician, heal thyself. Hello.
that you will cause the eating of the rich because of these parking tyrannies.
Oh,
is the
what?
word.
Parking.
Yes.
Yeah. Tyranny.
It is tyranny.
We should get together and assign some sort of document against tyranny.
The
Get some-
parking manifesto.
Yeah, there we are. I like it.
I'm going to nail my set of rules onto the front of that church. That I parked in front of a church.
I'm sorry. I'm culturally obligated to respond this way. You don't have the balls. You won't do it.
I will find a 14th century church.
Write it on slate. So did you guys hear that Trump said that if he was in Florida that he would have actually like run into the school?
Well, now let's go back to your question about him being a bad salesman and are people fooled? And I think that's just one of those little lies that, like, your daddy will tell you that you know is a lie, but makes you feel better to hear it.
Oh, you
Right.
mean like he's coming home again?
Yeah. Nice.
Yes. And even if there's a weapon in the house, he'll probably run in.
But I do think that a lot of his fans know he's lying. But like I said, they just think he has to lie. Nothing's fair. Everything's on. I think every right-wing person thinks that the world is stacked against them and
Right.
they're the big victim. And so they have to lie. They have to do all this bullshit.
I think one of the most underrated aspects of where we are right now, the only person I've seen mention it at all is Bill Maher, and I've been talking about it to everybody who will listen, and that is the chemical component to our society right now. Grandma and 19-year-olds are doing the same drugs.
Yes.
Right.
Everybody's high on something. I went to
That
the
rapper,
doctor.
Lil Pump, he's always talking
Right.
about doing drugs with his grandma.
Him and Grandma take meds.
Yeah.
His lean costs more than your ring.
Yeah.
Hello.
That's true.
But we are a culture where grandma is on some heavy narcotics at the moment. And I think that plays into it. I think if you're so high off your ass at the opioids we're ripping out of the Middle East after a couple of wars.
No, and I think that brings up like a valid point. Like I think instead of like gerrymandering, like I think that we should start drug testing at the voting polls. Like why
Hey,
should
you slow that.
like
right. Hold on. Hello.
Like honestly, like instead of an ID, I'd rather not have an ID and like have a piss test because
Well,
like
what
why
Are
drugs-
you
should we-
mad, woman?
Wait. What drugs are you saying would disqualify you
This is a good question.
from voting?
And I didn't ask
I would
it.
say opioids and psychedelics.
Well, I mean, how many people are on opioids that aren't, addicts, though?
We went from them
well,
trying
why
to...
should they vote then?
And also, if you go to vote on acid, I don't think that means you're going to make a bad decision. Because you probably decided who you're going to vote for sober.
You probably think you're voting for God at that point.
You've never done acid. You don't know.
No, you haven't done
No,
this.
I have not.
Yeah, no.
We know.
Trust me, I
yeah.
can easily vote on acid.
So could I.
I mean, if you have to take the day off to vote, you might as well do acid.
We should make a pin.
I would say just meth. I would say I don't want people on meth to vote.
What about bath salts?
You know what?
Do you
I don't want to judge
how hard
them.
it is to retroactively fix the legislation to make all this stuff illegal over and over again? They change one chemical component of a designer drug, and what was illegal yesterday is now legal.
That's true.
Can't keep up with that. Drug testing people for voting, that's along the same lines as drug testing people for food stamps. I feel like it's a basic human right. It's one of the tenets of our society. It shouldn't really be about whether you're on drugs or not.
If you were in jail, especially in Florida, if you had ever been in jail, you're not allowed to vote. And a lot of people,
yes.
a lot of people that are on drugs are committing a crime, so
Yes.
they just have not been caught, so they're not in jail. So why should they be allowed to fuck everything up because they're on drugs?
If you think that criminals are fucking everything up, you couldn't be more mistaken. The person who has the average conviction, right? The person who's done 30, 60, 90 days in jail, the average person in America who's been incarcerated, who isn't a career criminal, shares our political views. The people we have to worry about are the people who are committing these huge frauds, these financial frauds.
Right.
They're the people who are involved in hijacking our government.
Yeah,
really,
you know who worries me? The people who think that no one who smokes weed is a good person, like Jeff
Right.
Sessions.
Correct.
Like that's a much scarier idea because those are the kind of like authoritarians who they don't really care about drug use. They just look for any excuse to lord over someone else.
well, he's just trying to distract from his like Filipino lady boys, but
Jeff Sessions?
Do tell.
What?
Hold on.
I mean-
Can we have a breaking
what?
news sound effect, please?
Oh, no, I mean, I just think that with the opioid crisis, like, we need to kind of pick a lane in this. And when we had the crack epidemic in the 80s in the inner cities, anybody that was on drugs, on heroin, on crack, they were a criminal, they went to jail. Now, all of a sudden, you got grandmas and prom queens that are on opioids. Now they have a disease.
That's correct.
As a country, we need to pick a lane. And right now, I'm feeling like if in the 80s, if you were a single mom living in the projects and you needed to go to jail, then if you're a grandma living in a trailer in the Rust Belt, then you need to go to jail.
I feel like we should go the opposite direction.
So do I. I feel like we should learn from the mistakes of our history. I think that what
So
happened
what are you
during
going to
that
do with
time...
all the people that were in jail for drugs?
We should let them out.
Correct.
And then
I
they
think
can
that,
sue all the municipalities, and then
No,
everyone is
well,
going to be
hold on.
bankrupt.
We don't have
Let's
to give them that
tackle
right.
one problem at a time. And before we get to how litigious we are and that everybody will sue everybody, let's start with the fact that these people who went in as nonviolent drug offenders now have lived in a system in which you need to stab other people not to be victimized.
Yeah.
Right.
So we have all these people who are not violent, which is basically a health issue. Addiction is a health issue in my mind, okay? And so we have these people they've become criminals as a byproduct of the punishment our society has doled out for what is effectively a health issue. So repeating that process, regardless of how social structure or race plays into it, is just stupid. And I don't want anybody to suffer, regardless of the color of their skin or how much money they make. Drugs is a problem for people, and it's a disease the same way that cancer is. And, I've heard all the arguments, but there are people who just can't stop this march to the grave being sped up by placing things in their body. And I think that we get back to what I was talking about earlier, which is empathy. How do you not feel for that person? Have you never been out of control? Have you never been addicted to something? Have you never been involved in a behavior that repeats, that is unhealthy for you, that you can't seem to stop? I think
Dating.
But I also think
Fair enough. Yeah, there you go.
I think there is an unfair kind of stigma that people have about drug users, that they think that they are all violent. That's kind of an 80s throwback idea that, from the Just Say No, that crackheads were just going around stabbing people for crack. And you know what? If you are a drug addict who doesn't hurt anyone, I really don't have a problem with you. And it's not like the people who use heroin or crack have these exponentially high rates of crime. It's not that on that level. Crime is more about necessity, and it's about like the person more than, you know, being high. I mean, yeah, there are people stealing, but it's mostly stealing. There used to be these 80s stories about crackheads running around just stabbing grandmas, and it really was almost always exaggerated. And, you know, and that's the thing. If you I don't think drugs should be illegal. Right. I don't think everyone should be on drugs, but I don't see how making them illegal really helps anything. It's the same thing with any victimless crime. You're just helping the underworld who's going. It's just like with prostitution. If you legalize prostitution, you'd have the same number of prostitutes, just no pimps.
Right.
And it's the same sort of thing. I don't think we should be demonizing drug users, except meth, because they're more Republican.
I don't have on the surface, I don't have a problem with drugs or drug users, but I think that if you're going to legalize it, you should just make it have a luxury tax and use that money to pay for things. But my real problem is that if you start deciding that now going forward that drug users have a disease and that we need to be empathetic towards them, then anyone that has been put in jail for using drugs, the same offense, needs to now be released. And to your point, now these people have been conditioned to be criminals because they needed to do that in order to survive. And as a society, we put that upon them, and we need to make them whole in some sense. And how do you make them whole? Well, normally you make someone whole financially. So now all of our money is going to be basically being doled out.
You're jumping to a gigantic conclusion that would never happen. We're not going to hand over money to these people. We're going to release them from prison.
I think before we get caught up
because
in the minutia,
we already have multiple states where this did happen, where we legalized marijuana, but we didn't give millions of dollars to everyone who went to jail for marijuana.
I think that we're going to start seeing it, and I think that if we start seeing people suing the state and suing the government, that and you can't really blame them because you
but
literally
they're not going to get it. The legislature's just going to say you can't sue for that. They already did. That's what happened. Denver's not doing it. So
this show is a good example of what our country is, which is a great many complexities intertwined,
right,
that make no sense, that are very difficult one at a time to try and solve rationally. And since they're all intertwined, I think that kind of leads to this feeling of hopelessness for people who are smart enough to grasp everything that's going on. I like to tell people, when people get bent out of shape, I like to say, it's not that you're losing it, it's that you're grasping it. And I feel like that's what's going on right now. I feel like everybody's kind of looking at each little petal on this rose and feeling every thorn.
And also, can I just say something about drugs?
No. Let's shut his mic off.
Some people need drugs. Some people need drugs. Here's the dirty little secret about opiates. They're amazing.
Really?
They feel, look, I'm very open. I'm a pothead.
What?
But
Oh my goodness.
But look, a lot of people have lives that suck.
I'm probably
and
going to sue you people.
And if you're not hurting anyone,
a lot of people have lives. Are you now making the argument for opiates?
Yes. I'm saying let's have a little sympathy.
I feel like, so now I was in a taxi accident and I had like 3 herniated discs. I'm getting to it. So I've been, I went to pain management and I was prescribed a ton of opiates and I was on opiates for almost a year, but I didn't get hooked on them.
Well, let me ask you an important question. Do you still have any? Sorry, go
on. No, and you ask those questions off air. But like that's where I understand we need to be empathetic. So like I understand the needing of opioids. So I'm empathetic in that sense. But I guess I lack sympathy in the sense that when I started feeling like, oh, like I've been on these for a while, I should take myself off. I literally took myself off of them, went to my pain management doctor, and he's like, oh, well, like how many pills are you up to a day? And I'm like, oh, I took myself off of that like 3 weeks ago. And then he's like, oh, you can't take yourself off. You're going to start withdrawing. And I was just like,
Dr. Feelgood's trying to make some more money, huh?
And I was just like, yeah, no, I mean, it was like kind of like a rough like 3 days, but like, yeah, I'm all right. Like, and he did kind of keep like, oh well, like you're gonna like have like pains and you're gonna be like uncomfortable, and it's like, like I'm fine without it. So like I kind of feel like, something, life is pain. Like you're not always gonna feel 100%. Like you're gonna have shitty days, you're gonna have better days. Like you don't need the shit 24/7, and I don't know why I need to pay for the fact that you don't know how to stop yourself. Like I mean, that's where I'm at that.
Well, what do you mean by pay for? You mean like with healthcare?
Yeah.
There is a drain, right?
No, yeah, there is a drain. And we should, no. Look,
Very
we
simply, let me
should.
ask you, can you not believe that you are stronger than some other people?
No, because I'm an average schmo.
Wow. That's adorable. Your modesty is in the way of my argument.
No, look, of course we should be trying to help a lot of people get off opiates. We have a really big problem that there are too many people who are just relying on their daily OxyContin just to, like, get through the day because, it's human condition and life sucks.
Well,
But,
you've
yes.
made several arguments in favor of opioids, so I'm going to take what you say with a grain of salt. But I think that you make a good point, which is there is a drain on the system. People now, the part of the opioid crisis is this huge drain on the system. But then you have these people who, were introduced to opioids, who are people who wouldn't smoke a joint on the weekend, straight edge people, right?
Right.
Who then end up doing heroin and they're dead. So you have this crazy roller coaster of people who are the pillars of society, the soccer moms, the dad who, owns a construction company. I mean, top to bottom, veterans, the salt of the earth are dying from heroin addiction 18 months after giving people this product. Mm-hmm. I think that's something to be concerned of. And I know that we've kind of talked a little bit cavalierly about drugs. I'm going to make my own views very plain. I think pot should be legal. I think that opioids are, a lot more problematic. I wouldn't be for the legalization of that kind of stuff. I would want people to have to go to a doctor. And I would prefer that the doctors who are able to give you opioids become specialists, that you have to be recommended. This way there's a, 2 doctors have to say, yes, I thought it was a good idea. As opposed to one guy writing you something, now you have another colleague where the two of you have this, you have to either collude to agree, right? To give somebody these falsely, or you have to, one of you has to have a sensible opinion. I think it might make it more difficult to have 2 people. But yes, remember?
I was going to say, remember Trump's doctor, was it Bornstein?
Are you talking about the dude who looked like he was a roadie for Jimmy Buffett?
Yes.
Okay.
That I was saying. Whenever I think of like a crooked doctor, I think like the kind of guy who just lives to give out prescriptions.
He was the healthiest president in the history of presidents.
Yes. Obviously a crooked doctor who had that. He had like that weird like Tiny Tim wig.
Yes.
He had, and the pencil drawing of himself, and his mug was the fake urine sample mug. If you noticed,
I did not notice
his mug
that.
was meant to look like a urine sample of his coffee mug. Like, yeah, you think of those doctors. It's one thing to have those for weed, where it's just to get medical. That everyone doesn't really care, but yeah, we need to have less doctors willing to just hand out oxys, because the people who make OxyContin, they know that, like, hey, according to the number of pills we make, every human being on Earth is taking one of these a day.
Right.
That doesn't sound right.
Right. And I think that, to your point, but I also think that the companies that produce these drugs also need to be held accountable, because they're also kicking back these doctors. And so, like, you'll have, these pharmaceutical reps that are sending these doctors on vacations for how many scripts they write. And then, of course, these doctors are writing these scripts. And there was a small town, I believe in West Virginia, that only had something like 1,200 residents, and they had like over 2 million OxyContin pills or like opioid pills in some ilk. Just because the 3 or 4 doctors that were there were just getting so many kickbacks from the pharmaceutical companies for doling out all of these prescription medications. And I know that I always sound litigious, but the pharmaceutical company needs to be sued. Those doctors need to be sued. And like at the same time, like, I understand that these patients trusted their doctor, but doctors are human and they're also greedy. Like, there's got to be a point where you're accountable for your own life and you're like, oh, you know something? This does not sound like a good idea. I shouldn't be doing this.
Maryssa, you are just better prepared to deal with the ebb and flow of life and personal responsibility than most. There are a lot of people out there that are much, much weaker than you, which I guess this is an odd compliment in that you are strong. And I think that gets in the way of you seeing some people for what they are, which is just frail and flawed.
By the way, if you're ever in a doctor's office, here's a fun game. Ask for a pen. If you go to your doctor's office, ask for a pen that doesn't have a pharmaceutical drug on it.
Yeah.
Well,
Find a pen without Abilify on it.
if we're going to discuss that also, then we need to discuss that. It's not just the doctors getting kicked back, it's the politicians.
Right.
It's the real problem with
The
everything
lobbyists.
we've discussed all day long is the money in politics, corporate money going into politics. And it's not even lobbyists. I think it's the Senate. They spend 2/3 of their time calling to raise money for whichever political party they're part of. 2/3 of their time, the Senate is not working on any government business. They're just trying to get more money to fuck the other guy. It's my synapses are clogged. We can solve 80% of the big picture problems by just ripping that money out, not having anybody, any corporation be able to put money into the United States, have all public money.
Publicly funded campaigns.
Correct.
Yeah.
And people
Everyone
are like,
gets
well,
the
where's the
same
money
amount.
coming from? Corporate welfare. We end corporate welfare tomorrow. If you own a corporation that we subsidize, now it's time for that free market you Republicans like to talk about so much.
Honestly, the amount of money it would cost to pay for the campaign, it wouldn't be that much. It really wouldn't be, because we're just
Let
talking
'em
about
go
some
now.
airtime. We're talking about some places. The money to run, we don't need to spend the amount of ad time that we spend on these elections. Other countries do this. The amount of money that it would cost to publicly fund these campaigns would be made up so fast in just how much less corruption there would be. It's ridiculous.
I agree. And what we have here is a system of legitimized graft,
Right.
Yeah.
where corporations give money to politicians to shape legislation to sell us more bullshit. And that's the reason why there are guns in the classroom. It's the reason why Little Pump and his grandma are both snorting the same opiates. It's the reason your politician can't vote his conscience.
It's the reason the NRA has a stranglehold
Correct.
on the Republican Party, even though nobody actually agrees with them.
Correct.
Because they have enough money to buy these, and because the fact that the difference is the tiny number of people who are staunch NRA voters do not care about any issue except for their guns.
Correct. It's a very, very odd thing to me. I cannot imagine a life where I would rather have a rifle in my house than save children.
No, it's true, and especially like the Republican Party is always kind of like, you know, family values, and you
It's
have
horseshit.
to make children safe, and like, you know, like I understand the Second Amendment and constitutional rights, but the Constitution said you could have a musket, so no one's saying you can't have a musket.
Anybody who is holding on to this argument of fighting the government over tyranny should really research some of the weaponry we've been putting money. If you think your AR-15 is going to fight off the drone strikes, the government, you're going to fight the government with the rifle you got at Kmart. This is just not a rational or reasonable person's argument.
Yeah, if you believe...
I just riled you up. I see that again.
No, yeah, if you
you're about to
believe-
yell at me about eating people, aren't you?
If you believe that you have a constitutional right to the AR-15 because of the right to bear arms, it means you also believe you have a right to those drones. It means you also believe you have the right to Tomahawk missiles and Apache helicopters, because they
All
said
right,
the right
now
to bear...
maybe I'm on your side. I
They
can
said-
have an Apache helicopter.
They said the right to bear arms.
Right.
That included artillery. It included any weapon
How
that
many
existed because
lists
you were supposed
do
to
you
be able
wanna
to fight
get
the
on?
government. So the point is, when they talk about, well, we have a right to those weapons, they're being liars and hypocrites, because if they really believed that, they would believe that they had the right to
Nobody-
nuclear weapons.
That's
There is always a degree, and we're just arguing about where. It's like the old joke about, like, would you have sex for $50? Would you have sex with me for $100,000? The woman says yes. What about $50? She says, what do you think I am? He goes, we already know what you are. Now we're just negotiating price. It's the same thing with guns. It's like you can't you know there's got to be a limit to the weapons you have. You just want the AR-15.
Well, I think it all gets back to we're willing to lie to get what we want. And is that a byproduct of us watching politicians do that and feeling cheated from our own country, our own system of government.
But the other thing I don't understand is like, you know, like kind of to your point where we're saying that like the NRA is like so like Republicans are so pro NRA, but like why are you okay with giving weapons to all these people that don't believe in the government, that are basically want to believe in anarchy? Like you're giving all of these weapons to militias that want to fight the government, but then you're fighting for the right for these people that want to kill government to have weapons.
Actually, I can answer that for you because you said the words, why are we giving these weapons? We're not giving, we're selling. And that's why. Because of the money that the gun manufacturers and then the NRA in turn make from them buying those weapons.
It's
But
a
isn't
shared
like Smith and Wesson, like aren't they going out of business? Like they filed for bankruptcy. So like how much money are these like gun companies actually making if you're like one of the oldest ones
it's a big
going
profession.
out of business?
Oh, Smith and Wesson aren't even really the problem. They wanted to have guns that only the buyer could use and would have special smart guns that you have to fingerprint, and it was the NRA that stopped them from having those kind of protections. The Smith and Wesson would be fine with whatever regulations came down. It's the NRA that's stopping them. They're the ones who are now saying, how dare you say 18-year-olds can't buy assault rifles in Florida now?
It's not really the National Rifle Association. It is the propaganda arm of the manufacturers of guns in America. There are 5 million people who are registered or supposedly NRA members. And I keep reading online and in the newspaper people saying, they keep sending me this stuff. I've never sent them a check. I've never said I'm an NRA member. So those membership rolls are probably really, really inflated for the sense that they want people to believe there are many more people in a grassroots movement on the ground. But that's part of the game.
So they're like Russian troll bots.
Well, yes, but I think we fall into a trap when we say Russian, 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 Russian. I believe what happened with I believe that there was Russian influence and is okay.
Yeah.
So, but I think that also once we make it this one person we have to look out for, there are thousands of other interests that go unchecked.
Yeah.
It's not just the Russians. It's the people selling you Tide. It's the people. Absolutely every corner of this globe is scrapping for information about you to rip every last penny out of you or get your vote. It's the Matrix, and the fuel is our votes and our money.
It is amazing how, like, now every time you look up and you buy anything online and then you have to see that thing in your ads every goddamn second you're online now.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just bought it. I don't need it anymore. Like, I literally looked up, like, the price of a coin to see like what some old coins were worth, and now I can't turn on my computer
Right.
without just like banner ads everywhere of like liquidate your coins. What are you doing with those coins?
I am now going to Google ladyboys from all my straight friends'
Yeah,
computers.
do it. Be nonstop.
Okay.
No, it's a joke that I never actually used in a roast where I said I looked them up for this to learn information about you, and now I constantly get ads for pepper spray and HPV tests.
That's good.
Rob is here and the door is locked.
Okay.
Is anyone downstairs?
No, downstairs they seem to have things well in hand. I got to tell you.
Well, we'll take a quick break and
I think. Am I bailing? Is this it for me?
No.
Do you want to stay?
Sure. No,
Yeah,
I'd be more than
absolutely
happy
stay
to.
then.
Thank you.
So, we're going to take a quick break, you guys. This is Blamestorming. We will be right back.